She was just a humble waitress, serving tables quietly in a glittering hall of billionaires. No one noticed her until an arrogant sheikh decided to make her his target. He mocked her, humiliated her in front of powerful guests, expecting her to bow her head in silence. But instead of breaking, Emily looked him in the eye and replied, in flawless Arabic. Her words struck like thunder. Dignity isn't in wealth, but in how we treat people. The entire room froze. The sheikh who commanded empires was left speechless by a waitress in an apron. What began as a cruel insult turned into a life-changing moment of truth, respect, and transformation. This is not just a story of mockery and pride. It's about courage that silences arrogance and how one act of bravery can change everything. The luxury restaurant on the edge of downtown sparkled like a palace that evening. Golden chandeliers hung from high ceilings, scattering light across polished marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. The tables were dressed in white linen, embroidered with golden thread, each adorned with crystal glasses that caught the glow of candlelight. The air was thick with the mingling scents of saffron, roasted lamb, and cardamom coffee. Every chair was filled with the elite, politicians, businessmen, and dignitaries flown in from across the world. Waiters in pressed black uniforms glided silently between tables, their trays balanced with military precision, as if each step had been rehearsed for this night. Among them was Emily Carter, a young waitress with light peach skin and chestnut brown hair pulled into a neat bun. She looked smaller, almost invisible, compared to the glittering gowns and tailored suits around her. Her black uniform and plain white apron marked her clearly as staff, yet she carried herself with quiet grace. For Emily, this wasn't her usual world. She was used to small diners, noisy coffee shops, and neighborhood regulars. Tonight she had been called in as extra staff for an exclusive banquet, an event unlike anything she had seen before. Every detail screamed wealth, power, and authority. A stage set not for workers like her, but for the people who believed themselves untouchable. At the center of it all sat Sheikh Kareem al-Mansour. Even in a room filled with power, he dominated effortlessly. Dressed in an ivory silk thobe, with golden cufflinks flashing at his wrists, he carried himself like a man who owned not just businesses, but destinies. His reputation had preceded him. An oil magnate turned global investor, ruthless in business and unforgiving to rivals. His dark eyes scanned the room with sharpness, his smile quick and charming when he wished, but his tongue sharper than any blade when displeased. The staff whispered about him nervously. Stories of his arrogance and cruel humor circled like ghost tales. People said he enjoyed mocking those beneath him, turning their embarrassment into entertainment. Emily felt her pulse quicken when she realized she had been assigned to his table. Clutching her tray of drinks tightly, she approached with measured steps. "Your order, sir," she said softly as she set the glass down in front of him. Kareem's gaze lifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. His lips curled into a faint smirk. "Your accent," he remarked in flawless English, his tone dripping with disdain. "Where are you from? You sound provincial. Certainly not trained for service at a place of this standard." Heat rushed to Emily's cheeks, but she kept her voice even. "I'm working here tonight, sir. Just making sure your table has everything it needs." Kareem leaned back in his chair, the smirk widening. "A simple waitress among royalty and billionaires. Tell me, girl, do you even understand half the words printed on this menu?" Laughter rippled across the table. His companions, wealthy men in dark suits and jeweled watches, chuckled, shaking their heads at her expense. A few nearby guests turned to look, eager to see the humiliation. Emily's hands trembled on the tray. She had endured rude customers before, but this was different. This was deliberate cruelty, meant to strip her dignity in front of dozens of strangers. She wanted to lower her gaze, to retreat quietly as she had always done. But something inside her stirred. A memory, her father's voice, warm and steady, teaching her when she was a child. He had loved languages, and he had taught her Arabic years ago, saying, "Respect isn't in wealth, Emily. True respect is in how you speak to others, in how you treat them." She had practiced secretly, whispering phrases when she was alone, never knowing the day would come when those words would matter. Her chest rose with a deep breath. She looked up, meeting Kareem's eyes without flinching. "Perhaps I don't understand everything," she said in English, her voice calm but firm, "but you assume too quickly." The table erupted in chuckles again, convinced she had no way to defend herself. Kareem tilted his head, amused by her courage. "Oh? And what wisdom could a waitress possibly share that I do not already know?" The air was thick with anticipation, the laughter of the wealthy echoing against the chandeliers. Emily's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Then, in a voice that carried clear and strong, she replied in perfect Arabic, "Al-kirama laysat fa al-thiyab aw al-amwal, bal fi kayfa nata'amal ma'a al-nas." The words flowed like silk, every syllable precise, her accent flawless. Dignity is not in clothes or wealth, but in how we treat people. The effect was instantaneous. The laughter choked off mid-breath. Glasses froze in hands, forks paused over plates. The golden hall, buzzing only moments ago, dropped into stunned silence. Kareem's smirk faltered. His eyes widened, disbelief flashing across his face. He had expected broken words at best, a clumsy attempt. Instead, her Arabic was perfect, not just fluent but elegant, delivered with quiet authority. His companions exchanged shocked glances. Guests at nearby tables leaned forward, whispering in surprise. The waitress, this girl he had mocked, had spoken the Sheikh's own language with a grace that rivaled his own. Emily didn't move, didn't gloat, didn't shrink back. She stood tall, her tray at her side, her words lingering in the air like a challenge and a truth. She had not raised her voice, yet every ear in the room had heard her. And for the first time in years, Sheikh Kareem al-Mansour, the man whose words silenced others, found himself speechless. The silence that followed Emily's words stretched long enough to feel eternal. Every pair of eyes in the grand hall was fixed on her, the young waitress who had dared to defy the arrogance of one of the richest men alive. The clink of glasses had stopped. Conversations had frozen. Even the musicians who had been playing softly in the background lowered their instruments. The sentence she had spoken in perfect Arabic hung in the air like a spell. Kareem al-Mansour, a man used to absolute authority, sat stunned. His dark eyes narrowed, not in anger but in disbelief. For years, no one had challenged him in public. Not business rivals, not political leaders, not even journalists. And now a waitress, a woman in a plain apron, had not only answered him, but had done so in his own tongue, flawlessly. He opened his mouth, but for the first time in years, no words came. His companions, still reeling from the shock, shifted uncomfortably. One of them muttered, "Did you hear that?" Her pronunciation, it was perfect. Another leaned closer to Kareem. She must have studied. "This wasn't chance," whispers spread across the tables. Some guests were impressed, others scandalized. The idea that a billionaire sheikh had been silenced by a waitress was a story too sharp to ignore. Kareem finally straightened in his chair, regaining some of his composure. The smirk he had worn earlier was gone, replaced by a hard expression he reserved for boardrooms and negotiations. He leaned forward, his voice low but carrying across the hall. "Where did you learn that?" Emily met his gaze, her heart pounding but her face calm. "From my father," she said softly. "He taught me that respect is not measured in wealth, but in how we treat people." Kareem's jaw tightened. He searched her face for arrogance, for pride, for the kind of insolence he despised. But all he saw was steadiness, an unshakable dignity that no insult could tarnish. His companions waited for him to strike back, to crush the challenge and restore his dominance. But Kareem said nothing. Instead, he raised his glass, took a slow sip, and leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room broke with a ripple of nervous laughter. Guests whispered furiously, exchanging glances. Some smiled secretly, satisfied to see the mighty sheikh humbled. Others shook their heads, uneasy at the breach of decorum. Emily, her tray still in hand, gave a small nod and turned away, her knees trembling though she refused to show it. She walked back toward the service station, each step heavy with adrenaline. Her fellow waiters looked at her with wide eyes. Carla, a blonde colleague who had worked with Emily for years, whispered, "Emily, what did you just do? Do you realize who that man is?" Emily set down the tray, her hands shaking. "Yes, and I also know what he tried to do." "I wasn't going to let him." Carla's mouth opened in disbelief, but she said nothing more. Across the room, Kareem's advisors leaned toward him. "She embarrassed you in front of everyone," one hissed. "You cannot let this stand." Kareem's eyes remained fixed on Emily's retreating figure. Embarrassment wasn't the word. What he felt was something far more dangerous: curiosity. He had mocked her, expecting her to crumble, yet she had answered with strength. And not just strength, but mastery of a language that was his birthright. For the rest of the banquet, his attention drifted. He responded to conversations with half-hearted nods, but his mind stayed on the young waitress who had silenced him. When the evening ended and guests began to leave, Kareem remained seated. Emily thought she had escaped his notice, but as she carried empty glasses back to the kitchen, she felt his gaze burning into her back. Finally, when the last guest departed, Kareem rose. His tall figure cut through the thinning crowd like a shadow. Emily froze as he approached the service station. The other staff quickly dispersed, not daring to be caught in the exchange. Kareem stopped a few feet from her, his expression unreadable. "Emily Carter," he said, pronouncing her name with precise clarity after glancing at her name tag. "You speak Arabic better than some of my own countrymen." "Tell me why." Emily lifted her chin. "Because my father believed language is a bridge, not a barrier. He taught me to respect cultures by understanding them." Kareem studied her in silence. His eyes, usually cold and commanding, flickered with something different, something Emily couldn't name. "You are unusual," he said finally. "Most people in this room would have bowed." "You did not." Emily's pulse quickened. "Respect isn't bowing, sir. Respect is mutual." For a moment, Kareem almost smiled. Almost. Then he straightened. "I will remember this." And with that he turned and left, his entourage following swiftly behind. Emily exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the counter. She didn't know if she had just defended her dignity or ruined her future. But she knew one thing: something had shifted. The sheikh had noticed her. The next morning, the city buzzed with whispers. Guests from the banquet couldn't stop talking. Social media posts appeared describing the scene. Waitress shuts down sheikh in flawless Arabic. Some praised her bravery, others called it foolish. By midday, her name was trending in circles she never dreamed of. Emily tried to ignore it as she walked to her regular shift at the small diner where she usually worked. She wanted normalcy, but even there, co-workers teased her, customers whispered, and reporters had begun asking questions. She brushed it all off, insisting it was just a sentence, nothing more. But far away, in the sheikh's penthouse suite overlooking the skyline, Kareem replayed the moment in his mind. The waitress's voice, the confidence in her eyes, the words about dignity, they haunted him. He had built his empire on the belief that power silences all. But for the first time, power had failed him, and that was why he knew he would see her again. The following days blurred together for Emily, though each step felt heavier than the last. What she had thought was just one act of self-respect had turned into a wildfire she could not control. The story of the waitress who silenced a sheikh was now the city's favorite gossip. Bloggers wrote about her courage, videos reenacting the moment spread online, and customers came into the small diner where she worked just to catch a glimpse of her. Some applauded her bravery, calling her an inspiration. Others whispered that she was foolish, that no one insulted a man like Kareem al-Mansour and came out unscathed. Emily tried to block it out, focusing on pouring coffee and clearing plates. But every time a stranger's phone camera lifted toward her, her chest tightened. She had wanted dignity, not fame. Meanwhile, in the skyscraper penthouse that overlooked the city, Kareem sat in silence, reviewing the incident over and over in his mind. He replayed her words, her flawless accent, her steady gaze. He had been mocked before in private circles, but never publicly, never in his own language. Yet strangely, it wasn't anger that burned in him. It was fascination. How had a waitress, a nobody in his world, managed to pierce his armor so effortlessly? He instructed his aides to find everything about her, and by evening a full report sat on his desk. Emily Carter, 25, works double shifts in diners to support her ill mother. Fluent in Arabic, taught by her father who passed away years ago. Known to be polite, hard-working, invisible, until that night. Kareem leaned back, reading the report again. He should have dismissed it, filed her away as a curiosity. But something gnawed at him. He had built an empire by calculating risks, by seeing value where others didn't. And now, against his will, he saw value in her voice, her dignity, her refusal to bow. 3 days after the banquet, Emily's diner shift was interrupted by an unusual silence. The bell over the door jingled, and when she looked up, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Sheikh Kareem himself stepped inside, dressed not in flowing robes or silk, but in a dark, tailored suit. His presence still radiated power, but the mocking smirk was gone. Emily froze, the coffee pot in her hand trembling. The other customers stared, whispering furiously. Carla, her co-worker, whispered sharply, "Emily, that's him. What is he doing here?" Emily forced her breath steady and approached his table. "Why are you here?" she asked bluntly, her voice low. Kareem's eyes flicked to the curious crowd, then back to her. "To speak with you, privately." "I don't think we have anything more to say," she replied coldly. He leaned forward, lowering his tone so only she could hear. "You judged me, and you were right. But allow me the chance to prove that I can be more than the man you silenced." Emily blinked, her heart racing. "You think one apology will erase what you did? You humiliated me in front of a room full of people." His jaw tightened, but he did not retreat. "Yes, and you humiliated me in return, though with far greater honor. That is why I'm here, not to repay you, but to understand you." The sincerity in his voice startled her. For a man known for arrogance, this humility seemed almost impossible. Still, Emily shook her head. "Respect isn't a performance, Sheikh. You don't get to play at it when it suits you." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Finally, Kareem rose, leaving a business card on the table. "If you ever wish to speak, call me. Not as a sheikh, not as a billionaire. As a man who owes you his respect." He left without another word, his presence lingering long after the door closed. The diner erupted into chatter, customers buzzing with shock, but Emily stood still, staring at the card. Days passed, and she tucked the card into her apron pocket, determined not to use it. Yet she couldn't shake the memory of his eyes, not mocking this time, but searching, almost pleading. Meanwhile, Kareem surprised everyone in his circle. At a corporate gala, instead of boasting about deals, he spoke about dignity. "Power without respect," he told investors, "is nothing but emptiness." His advisors were stunned, whispering that the waitress had softened him. He ignored them. He found himself driving past the diner at odd hours, never stopping, only ensuring she was safe. It made no sense, yet he couldn't help himself. One rainy evening, Emily finished her shift and stepped outside, her coat thin against the cold. To her shock, a black car pulled up beside the curb, and Kareem stepped out holding an umbrella. "You'll catch pneumonia," he said softly, offering it. She stared at him, incredulous. "Why do you care?" His eyes softened. "Because you taught me something I had forgotten, that dignity is earned, not demanded. And I cannot forget the one who reminded me." Emily hesitated, then slowly took the umbrella. For the first time, she saw not the Sheikh Billionaire, but a man stripped of arrogance. Yet trust was fragile, and she wasn't ready to give it freely. "Actions, not words," she whispered, brushing past him into the rain. He watched her go, rain soaking his suit, and for the first time in years he didn't feel insulted. He felt challenged, and he welcomed it. For days after that rainy night, Emily thought about the sheikh standing silently in the storm, rain soaking his suit as he offered her shelter without demanding anything in return. It unsettled her. The man who had once mocked her in front of hundreds now waited outside diners with umbrellas, spoke to her with humility, and walked away when she refused to listen. He was not the same man she had first met, but Emily's heart had been hardened by too many disappointments to trust so easily. She told herself not to be swayed, that men like him always return to arrogance. And yet, she could not ignore what he was doing. A week later, the community center where Emily had once gone to practice her Arabic on an old broken piano announced a complete renovation. The dusty walls had been repainted, the cracked tiles replaced, the piano restored to its former beauty. No donor name was listed, but Emily knew. She confronted Kareem outside the diner that evening. "It was you," she said firmly. He didn't deny it. "The children of this city deserve better than broken instruments. And so do you." Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice cold. "I told you I don't want your money." He met her eyes. "This is not money, Emily. This is me learning to use what I have for more than pride." His words lingered long after he walked away. The next sign came days later when her mother's medical bills, which had haunted their family for months, were mysteriously cleared. Emily's anger flared as she stormed into the diner the next morning, finding Kareem seated at his usual booth. "You had no right," she snapped, slamming his coffee down. "Those bills were mine to handle." His gaze was calm, unflinching. "And they were crushing you. Tell me, did my help wound your dignity or free it?" Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but deep inside she knew he was right. She had carried those burdens for too long, and the weight had nearly broken her. Still, she would not give him the satisfaction of gratitude. "Respect isn't about buying people," she whispered. "It's about consistency." Kareem nodded slowly. "Then I will be consistent. You told me actions matter more than words, so watch my actions," and he proved it. Over the next month, Kareem quietly appeared in places no one expected. At the diner, he tipped generously but never demanded service. At the community center, he sat in the back, listening to children practice, never once announcing his involvement. At a neighborhood cleanup, Emily was stunned to find him dressed in simple clothes, helping carry trash bags alongside volunteers. Reporters tried to follow, but he dismissed them. These were not stunts for cameras. They were acts for himself, and perhaps for her. Emily's resistance slowly softened, though she told herself to remain cautious. Late one evening, after closing the diner, she found Kareem waiting outside. Instead of his usual limousine, he stood alone, holding 2 cups of tea from a street vendor. "Walk with me?" he asked simply. Against her better judgment, she agreed. They walked through quiet streets, steam rising from their cups, neon lights flickering around them. Kareem spoke softly. "When I was a boy, my mother taught me Arabic poems about honor. She told me wealth means nothing if you cannot look into another's eyes with respect. Somewhere along the way, I forgot her words. That night, when you answered me, you brought them back." Emily's heart clenched. For the first time, she saw not the Sheikh Billionaire, but a man carrying wounds of his own. They stopped near the river, city lights shimmering on the water. Emily finally asked the question that had haunted her. "Why me? Out of everyone in that hall, why do you keep chasing my respect?" Kareem turned to her, his eyes steady. "Because you are the only one who ever told me the truth without fear. You reminded me I'm human, and I cannot ignore the one person who made me see myself again." Emily's breath caught. His sincerity was undeniable, yet fear still lingered in her chest. "Words," she whispered, "are easy." Kareem took a step closer, his voice low and steady. "Then let me show you, not for applause, not for redemption, but because I want to deserve your respect." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of water lapping against the river's edge. Emily studied his face, searching for deception, arrogance, anything that would prove her doubts right. But she found only raw honesty. She finally exhaled, whispering, "Then prove it, Kareem. Not to me, but to yourself." He nodded, his eyes glimmering in the city lights. "I will." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to hope. She didn't forgive him fully, not yet. But she could see the man he was becoming, shaped not by wealth, but by the dignity he was learning to honor. And though she wouldn't admit it aloud, a small part of her wanted to believe in him. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Emily had ever imagined. She had expected the sheikh to eventually lose interest, to retreat back into his world of glass towers and golden halls. But Kareem kept showing up, not in limousines with flashing cameras, but quietly, humbly, in ways that no one else noticed. He sponsored music programs for children anonymously. He donated books to the community center, making sure the shelves were filled with Arabic poetry and English classics alike. He even arranged part-time jobs for struggling teenagers in the neighborhood, ensuring they could stay in school. Every act was deliberate, consistent, not for show, but for change, Emily noticed. Slowly, her guarded heart began to soften. She saw him not as the arrogant sheikh who once mocked her, but as a man learning to rebuild himself. Yet she still hesitated, fearing that it could all be an illusion. One evening, as autumn leaves swirled through the streets, Kareem invited her to a cultural gala hosted by the city. "Come as my guest," he said, his tone careful. Emily frowned. "And stand by your side so people can whisper I'm your charity project." He shook his head firmly. "No, come as my equal. I will not hide what you mean to me." Against her doubts, Emily agreed. The night of the gala, she wore a simple yet elegant gown borrowed from a friend. When she entered the hall, whispers rose immediately. Guests remembered the night of the banquet, the waitress who silenced a sheikh. They stared now, some curious, some envious, others skeptical. Kareem walked beside her, not leading her like a possession, but matching her pace, his expression calm. As speeches began, one of Kareem's rivals, a wealthy magnate with a cruel smirk, sneered across the room. "So this is the girl who tamed the mighty Al-Mansur." His voice was loud enough for many to hear. The laughter of a few nearby guests rippled. Emily froze, the sting of humiliation rising again. For a heartbeat she feared Kareem would stay silent, would let the insult stand. But he rose slowly, his tall frame commanding the hall, and spoke in Arabic so resonant it silenced the entire room. "هذه المرأة التي سميتم ببنت فقرة هي التي ذكرتنا بالشرف. هذه التي لم تخف من قولي وأعلمتنا أن الكرامة فالنفس ليست فالأموال." His words echoed. "This woman you call a poor girl is the one who reminded me of honor. She who feared nothing when I mocked her, she who taught me that dignity lives in the soul, not in wealth." Gasps spread across the hall. Kareem turned, this time speaking in English for all to understand. "She is not my charity. She's my teacher. And if you cannot respect her, then you cannot respect me." Emily's heart pounded as the hall erupted in applause. For the first time she did not feel small. She felt seen, truly seen. But the true twist came later that night. After the gala, Kareem led Emily outside to the quiet garden of the venue, away from the noise. His eyes were steady but vulnerable. "Emily, I have something to tell you. The night I mocked you, it was not random. I had instructed my aides to test the staff to see who could be broken, who would bow. I was arrogant enough to believe fear measured loyalty. You were meant to fail." Emily's breath caught, anger rising in her chest. "So I was just a game to you?" He shook his head quickly. "No, you were supposed to be a test. But instead you became my answer. I realized in that moment that my wealth had blinded me, that I had lost the ability to respect truth. And you, your words, your courage, cut through everything. It was the greatest humiliation of my life, and also the most important lesson." Emily stared at him, torn between fury and awe. His honesty cut deep, but so did the sincerity in his eyes. "And why tell me this now?" she whispered. His voice softened. "Because if you ever choose to trust me, it must be with the full truth. I will not build something with you on lies." For a long moment Emily was silent. Then slowly she exhaled, her anger giving way to something unexpected: respect. "You were arrogant, Kareem. You still are sometimes. But you've changed. Not for me, but for yourself. That's the only reason I can believe you." He stepped closer, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for hers. "Then let me say what I should have said that night. Emily Carter, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to stand beside you, not as a sheikh above a waitress, but as a man who finally understands what dignity means." Emily's heart thudded. For months, she had fought against this, afraid of being consumed by his world. But now, as she looked at him, she saw not a billionaire wrapped in arrogance, but a man stripped bare, humbled, honest. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. "One chance," she said quietly. His smile was small, almost disbelieving, but it carried more weight than all his fortunes. In the months that followed, Emily's life transformed. She pursued her love for languages and music, Kareem supporting her not with wealth, but with encouragement. Their partnership grew not from power, but from equality. And whenever people whispered about the strange pairing of a sheikh and a waitress, Emily would smile, remembering the night it all began, the night she chose dignity over fear. The story that started with mockery ended not with riches or crowns, but with a truth neither could deny, that one act of courage could silence arrogance, awaken humility, and forge a bond stronger than wealth itself.